Marketer of the Day, episode 568, The Income Incubator. Commit to taking action, fill the convenience gap, and fail fast with Jeet Bannerjee.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We're chatting with Jeet Bannerjee, and Jeet is a 25-year-old serial entrepreneur. He's a TEDx speaker, and he's a digital marketing consultant. And Jeet began his entrepreneurial journey at the age of 17, and since that time, he's launched over 10 successful businesses, and he's also sold 2 companies for a profit. And Jeet helps other entrepreneurs jumpstart their business dreams. So sounds like fun topics. Excited to jump on in. How are things, Jeet?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Heck yeah, glad to have you. So I mean, what's your focus these days? What are you all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm really focused on one company specifically. It's called the Income Incubator, and it's pretty much this academy where I teach 7 different online businesses, give them kind of the blueprints, lectures, shortcuts, and one-on-one mentorship to help entrepreneurs kind of get jump-started with their online business dreams. And I've kind of started over 10 plus businesses in my 8 years of being an entrepreneur. Some of them have failed epically. Some of them have succeeded greatly. So I've just kind of taken the things that I've learned from the successful businesses that have been like businesses that can be duplicated, and I just kind of teach those and help others get their businesses off the ground in this academy.
I love it. So you went through all the trial and error. You figured out what does and doesn't work, so that way other people don't have to blaze that same trail that you did. They can hit the ground running, and they can just use your blueprint there to get started, so that way they don't have to go through, hopefully, as many of the struggles as yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better.
Awesome. So, I mean, so you teach people how to make one of 7 online businesses. So, like, what sorts of businesses are these?
Yeah, absolutely. So the businesses range from like creating your own like web application, mobile application, selling like digital books like ebooks online, selling physical products like whether it's on Amazon or through like a Shopify website, creating your own blog, starting a social media agency. So pretty much all these types of businesses are the ones that we kind of teach and share.
Super cool. So you say, here's one of these containers, like, so you can make this physical Amazon product, or you can make this app, and then apply your own creativity, your own idea, your own niche within that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of teach people from the conception process, like good ways to find out good ideas to start and all that good stuff, all the way till the process of like marketing and growth and scaling and hiring employees. So we really take them from step 1 to step 10. Obviously, we don't kind of tell them like, oh, make a book about butterflies, like that's the part where that individual creativity comes in. But we kind of shortcut the rest of the process where we tell them exactly how to do things. And then it's just a matter of where they decide to apply that talent to.
I love it. So yeah. So you say here's the roadmap, but there's lots of fill in the blanks, so that way it's not like, I mean, it's not like anyone can just plug in and blindly follow. You still have to add your own creativity, but you'll help them deal with some of those bottlenecks, those hangups. Here's how you get your leads coming in. Here's how you scale and hire employees and all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, before we got together today, I looked up a little bit about you, and I saw that you're a pretty young guy, and you got started even younger, and I didn't even know that TEDx Youth was a thing. So can you kind of start us from the beginning and tell us, I mean, how and why you got started, and how the heck did you find all this cool stuff so young?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey really began when I was 15 years old. One day while I was in high school, one morning, my dad just came into my room, woke me up, and he was just like, hey, I've been thinking, and I think you need to go get a job. I'm only going to pay for like your food and clothing and shelter and the basic necessities. But if you want the latest video game or you want to go hang out with your friends at the movies, whatever it is, that's on you. So as you can imagine, with like great frustration, I was very bummed out, and I ended up going and applying to various jobs. So from 15 to 17, the crazy thing was that I was only working maybe like 10 to 12 hours a week, just any odd job like a teenager can get. And I'd worked almost 12 different jobs in a span of 2 years. And the crazy thing was that I was either getting fired or quitting from every single job. And finally, like my senior year of high school came around, and I was doing college applications, and I had this great plan of, applying to college, getting into a good business school, getting a business degree, and working a corporate 9 to 5. but I became terrified of the idea of working just because I felt so awful and so frustrated working 10 hours a week part-time. So that thought of working 40 hours a week like terrified me. So one day I decided to just hop on Google and kind of Google my so-called symptoms because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't work. I thought something was terribly wrong with me. So I get on Google and I start searching up these symptoms, and one of the first videos I come across is one from Richard Branson, and he kind of talks about his early days and how he felt like he was unemployable and how he always felt like he was in prison and didn't have freedom when he worked jobs, and he just felt really awful. And I totally related with those feelings that he shared in this video, and he kind of ended that video by saying that if you felt the same way that I did a long time ago, then that means that you should be an entrepreneur. And that's just when I just kind of jumped in, dove in head first as a senior in high school and said, you know what, I'm going to give this entrepreneurship thing a chance.
Super awesome. So it sounds like you have a good work ethic. You're willing to put in the hours, but just the 9-to-5 stuff wasn't fitting for you. We went from job to job, and then instead of just giving up like a lot of people might do, or a lot of people might say, well, I know I'm unhappy, I know something's wrong, but I'll just stick with this path other people told me to go through. Instead of that, you went in and looked up the answer yourself, did the research, and then figured out that you need to be an entrepreneur, that is a better fit for you than being a 9-to-5 career. Some people might say mindless zombie sort of drone. You said, I need to sort of write my own ticket, do my own thing. So at that point, what was your thought process? What did you investigate? What sort of paths did you go down from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So once I kind of figured out that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, it just really came down to me to figure out like what kind of business I wanted to start it or how I wanted to apply my entrepreneurship skills. And so one of the businesses or one of the companies that I'd worked for part-time as like an assistant was this web design company. And I had kind of learned a lot. And one of the biggest things I had learned was that web design companies would make a killer amount of money for doing some really basic things. So initially that really intrigued me, and I thought, you know what, I want to create my own web design company. So then I kind of just started researching the market and just seeing kind of, you know, like what types of prices people were charging and what services they would offer. And I quickly found, I made a big discovery. I found out there was a bunch of people overseas that didn't speak the language well, and they would offer websites for dirt cheap, you know, like $500 to $1,000. And then you had all the companies locally here in the US that spoke the language well, obviously, and had those skills. And the same projects, they would offer it for maybe 10 grand or 8 grand. And that was kind of like my aha moment, because I was like, okay, I don't really know how to make a website. I know the bare minimums, but I don't think it's good enough to do it for customers. So what if I just partner up with someone overseas and kind of be their voice over here in the US? So kind of do the marketing and the project management and the communication with the clients, and I kind of find that middle ground. So instead of being $1,000 and instead of being $10,000, I'm in like that $5,000 range. And so that's kind of like the discovery I made, and then I just ran with it from there. I partnered up with a freelancer, sold my first website without even having a website. So I would just go to all the stores and stuff around my house, call them up, walk into them and try to talk to the owners and just be like, hey, I saw your website, or I saw you didn't have a website. Let me make one for you. And eventually, after probably about like 80 to 90 no's, got my first yes, and we were off and running.
Super cool. So there's a bunch of sort of micro lessons in there that I'm hearing. One is that it's important to figure out early on what business model is a right fit, right? And I'm sure that you've seen this too. And it's not even like an age thing. It's not even a young or an old person thing. I see people all the time. They think that they have a business. They think that they're a web designer, but they don't even really have clients. So I'm looking at some of these people and I mean, I started seeing people like this, like when I was in high school too, people said, oh, I'm a web designer, I'm a freelancer. I'm like, but you just kind of designed your own website. You didn't really do much of that. But then, even there are, 50, 60, 70-year-olds out there who have one website, or they printed up business cards and they haven't actually gotten to the money yet. So they don't even know if this is something that they like, right? They're pursuing the dream, and they're not actually making the dream a reality yet because they haven't actually got to the money. So when I'm hearing your story, that's kind of one of many little lessons that I'm hearing, that how important it is to get to maybe even like a few jobs, or even get to some of the work early on, whether that's a web design or an e-commerce Amazon fulfillment thing. That way we can tell if we actually like to do this day in and day out. And the other lesson I'm hearing from you there is that you were looking for the disconnect, the gap to be filled. Basically, like, in the pre-Uber days, it was so freaking awkward just to get a taxi, but then now there's Uber, you push a button, so it's like that gap has been filled. And the gap that you filled there is that people want websites cheaply, or maybe just not at a huge inflated price, but then they have difficulty dealing with these overseas people. So you said, I can jump in and do the best of both worlds. I can deal with people here in the United States, or in the Western world at least, and then communicate with the people doing the work. And then the third and final lesson I'm hearing from you is that you weren't afraid to get out there, talk to people, get past the no's and get to the yeses. You had some of that that braveness, right? Some of those social skills, so that you were actually getting out there again, unlike a lot of people out there who are just afraid to make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are some great points that you really hit on. And I think, just especially about the last thing, I think the most daunting thing, especially when you start a new business, is kind of hearing no's and dealing with rejection. And I think I was just kind of lucky because I kind of just always grown up with hearing no and getting in trouble so often that it never really stopped me. So I think that was one of the things that kind of really guided me early on when I heard 80 no's calling people hanging up on me, or people saying no, or whatever it was. To me, it was just okay, that's fine. There's still a billion other companies out there that I can call. And once I got that first one, it was just that aha moment. And after that, I was so motivated that no matter what, I was just on the phone getting things done. So yeah.
I love it. You had that rough, thick skin, and then you had enough of an abundance mindset so that you knew you had to play the numbers game and just make enough calls. And then once you had that one, then you were like, okay, now I've got that proof of concept. I know that this works. Now I'm excited to go off and do some more. So, what happened at that point? Once you had that first sale, what grew from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it just everything just grew exponentially, right? So my first sale, I didn't even have my own website, didn't have a business entity, really had nothing. So I got that first sale, got the money from that, used that to start a business entity, get a website of my own made, and kind of make the business actual business. And then from there, went out, sold another one and sold another one. And eventually, after about 2 years of running the business, I had over 20 employees. I had my own offshore facilities in India. So instead of just partnering up with random freelancers and stuff like that, I had guys on my actual payroll, and we were just able to really grow massively. Instead of working with a handful of clients per month, I was at maybe 20 to 25 clients per month. And so pretty much just everything just really just started growing exponentially. And I've always been someone where, if something works, I'm guns blazing after that. So I was putting in 18-hour days, 19-hour days, and that's what really allowed me to grow so fast and so rapidly. And so once all that growth took place, I ran that company for about 2 years. And then when I was 19, I ended up selling it for a profit.
Nice. And so as far as growing and scaling that company, do you think that there was a secret to that? And the reason why I ask is because I'm sure you've seen some people have either a hesitation or things go great really well, and then they start putting their foot on the brake, and then I go and reach out a couple years later and I'm like, what happened to that cool program that you were building up? And then they're like, oh yeah, it got too big, it got away from me, it became more than I can handle. And I just look at that and I think, geez, that's a real shame that just when it was taking off, they became nervous, or they backed off, or they sabotaged, or they had some kind of excuse. So, what do you think is it about you that made you go with it, as opposed to people who just kind of back out or flake out? Or do you think it's just part of this kind of innateness that we've been talking about with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just comes down, for me personally, I think it came down to just a lot of fearlessness and a little bit of foolishness mixed in, right? So I was 19 years, or I was 17, 18 initially. And so I really didn't have much responsibilities, nothing like that. So all the money that I got in, it was let's just dump it all right back in. I got X amount, let's see if I can get 2X or 3X. So for me, it was just a lot of fearlessness and foolishness. And for me, I've always been a big believer of start very small, be very frugal in the early days. But when something's working, right, you gotta go full out, just hit the accelerator and just go all in. And I think the biggest issue that I see with a lot of other entrepreneurs and stuff that I work with is that they get comfortable, right? And I guess there's nothing wrong with this. It just depends who you are and what your goals are. But some people get comfortable at a point where they're like, oh, I'm making $10,000 a month. That's a 6-figure income. I'm comfortable. Why mess with it? Why try to grow this to 100,000 or something like that, right? So they get in this point of comfort and security, and they just say, you know what, I'm okay with that. And I think for me, it was just like, I'm never satisfied, right? Like, even if I'm making like $100 million, it's like, I want to get to $1 billion. Make $1 billion, it's like, I want to get to 10 billion. So for me, I've just got this relentless mindset, and some may look at it as a good thing, some may look at it as a bad thing, but for me, it's just like, I'm always striving to be the greatest at everything that I try and do, and I'm just super competitive. So that just really keeps fueling me and driving me, and I think that's what really helped me even early on, was just being completely fearless with my approach.
I love it. So have the fearlessness, the foolishness, and then if you're getting too comfortable, then maybe go back and re-examine why that is, and are you actually happy with it? As you said, if you're fine being comfortable, if you finally found your spot, great, but maybe there's more for you to push forward. And I think you touched on this a little bit in your TED Talk. It seems like a lot of people, again, of all ages, they put different life excuses in the way, right? It seems like if you have some of the older crowd, they say, oh, well, I have a family, I have all these other obligations. And then it also seems like with the younger crowd, there's that tendency to maybe live large and blow all the money. So have you seen sort of similar excuses with your students in this new program that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the crazy things that I've probably ever seen is, so I met this one girl, right? Maybe about a month ago. And so she had joined like a bunch of academies, taken a bunch of online courses and all that kind of stuff. And she was probably about like 30 grand in. And she was kind of like doing a consultation call with me. So she'd spent $30,000 on just like education for like various online businesses, or like businesses that she could start, not like formal education like a university or anything. So she gets on the phone with me and we're having this consultation, and she tells me this, and she's just like, yeah, and I know yours is like only $999, so it's not too bad compared to what I've already spent, and I think I should really sign up. And it totally blew my mind, because I was like, why are you trying to take my course if you've already taken like, 8, 9, 10 others, God knows how many she's taken. And she just kept telling me, I just don't feel ready. I just don't feel this. I just don't feel that. And it was kind of like one of the most mind-blowing things to me, because it's like, like, you give me 30 grand, I'll start your business for you. Like, I'll do it for you. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I think that some people really want to do something, but they just never end up taking action. And I think I've seen that quite a bit, whether it's with my students or just people in general. And that just really blows my mind. Like, I tell people all the time, like, if you're not going to, like, the first step that you need to do is not have a commitment to learning, but have a commitment to action. If you're committed to that taking action, you'll learn what you need to learn along the way, because you're so committed to your action. And I think that's a key thing that I've seen as a recurring theme. Like, you have some people that are action takers, that are just fearless, that'll go in. And then you've got a lot of people that are looking for the perfect plan, the perfect situation, and the perfect circumstances. And the best advice I have for those types of people is that life is never going to be perfect, right? The older you get, the harder things get, right? And so stop waiting for the perfect moment and just get started right now.
Right. I agree completely that the timing will never be just right. And that's your really, I don't know, that just sounds like a really scary mind space to be in, right? Because it's like something that motivates me sometimes is, sometimes I'll ask myself, if I don't feel like doing something, if I don't feel like making the website, or if I don't feel like presenting that webinar, I ask myself, well, what if I were to be paid $1 million for that one webinar, for that 1 hour? Of course I do it. What if I were to only be paid 100 grand or 10 grand? There's definitely a point when I wouldn't do it for $100, but there's still a price where I do it. But then, so what you're saying is, you come across people who they think they do it for any amount of money, but there could be all the money in the world on the line, and they just can't push themselves to do it. And if that's the case, then either they need to maybe re-examine some things, and either fix their bad mindset, or maybe look into a different way of making a living, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's spot on.
So something that I'm always curious about with other entrepreneurs is how do you decide when to keep something going versus when to change course? Because we all hear about entrepreneurial ADD, and then we hear about that persistence, like in your case where you had to talk to all the clients and keep things going. But then also you've gotten to the point where that your company got to the point where you sold the company itself. So how do you make those sorts of decisions of when to keep pursuing something or when to let it go and change course?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just comes down to two things for me. I think the first thing is like it's kind of like an inner thing for me. So like with my first company, the web design company, like at a certain point, like I loved making a lot of money and having the freedom. But then I realized that I wanted something deeper. I wanted something that was like going to fill me with purpose, something that would like be like a legacy. Like I realized what I wanted to be as an entrepreneur was a guy who left like a legacy, made a massive impact on the world and all those things. And so sometimes within yourself, if you're just not as passionate or feeling the business as much as you did when you first started, that's probably one of the biggest signs that it's time to kind of move on, whether it's selling it, handing it off to somebody, taking a lesser role, or just shutting it down altogether. So that's like the first thing that I would recommend. And then the second thing for me is just like I'm a big believer of this quote where men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And if, like so many people might be telling you like, oh, your business idea is great or this is a good concept, whatever it is. But if they're not pulling out their wallets and spending money and you're not making money, you're not profitable and the numbers are just not there, that's probably a telling sign that it may be time to kind of like wave the white flag, I don't always recommend people to, like go for years and years and years to see if their business will work. For me, it's like if you're going to fail, you might as well fail fast. So like, exhaust all of your resources, options, methodologies, hypotheses, whatever it is. And if nothing ends up working, it's probably time to wave the white flag, right? Like the numbers are just not there. So those are probably the two things that I recommend usually.
Okay, great. And that's an interesting insight there in that if someone is out there and their business isn't taking off, then I guess the question to ask is your business not taking off just because you haven't pushed it enough and you haven't marketed enough and you haven't put in those long days? That's one problem. But if you've been at this for years and you've honestly been marketing it out there and it's just a dud, it's just a bad seller, that's a different, it's a, if you've put it out there and the numbers are bad, that's a different type of failure than if you just have a pie in the sky idea and you just haven't implemented. So that's what I'm hearing from you. And so basically you're saying keep in mind what your big picture long-term goals are and what your legacy is going to be. And when your business started, you probably said, well, here's where I want to end up and my business fits with that. And if things have gotten away from you for a while and you have you just been too caught up in the day-to-day and you've lost that passion, then it's time to re-examine those things and see if the course can be corrected or if it's just time to give up with that business and jump into something new. And so along those lines, I'm curious now what got you from there to here. So you had that web design business and then you sold that, and then what happened between now and then to get us caught up?
Yeah, absolutely. So in between, after I sold the web design company, I started my next company, which was a company called StatFuse, which was like this online web application that helped high school students get into college. So we would like calculate their chances of getting into schools, analyze their college application, and pretty much serve as a virtual counselor using technology to help students with their college dreams. So that was kind of my second company, and I ran that one for about 3 or 4 years, and then we ended up selling that one as well, my partner and I. And then in addition to that, I've probably launched about like kind of how you mentioned with entrepreneurs and kind of having like that scatterbrain mindset. So even while I was running StatFuse and stuff like that, there's like a bunch of like side projects or businesses of that nature and stuff like that I was constantly launching. So pretty much from like 19 to 23, 24, I launched probably about like 6 or 7 other businesses, stuff that would make me like passive income on the side or just like random projects that I had an interest in. And then after I ended up selling StatFuse, I took a month off, just really wanted to figure out kind of like what I wanted to do. And then from there, I launched another company, which is like a health and vitamins company. And I still have that company today. And then a year after that, I launched the Income Incubator, which is the academy. And then in between, I've done a lot of like public speaking. So like speaking at events and stuff like that. I've wrote a bestseller book called Limitless Thinking. And I've done a little bit of consulting and helping like entrepreneurs with either their existing businesses or helping them jumpstart a new business idea off the ground and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I've been doing in between.
Fantastic. So you're the stereotype of the ADD entrepreneur, but still has all these things that make money. And it's easy for people to say, "Well, I'm super focused and I've narrowed it down to one thing." But it seems like when hearing about your story and talking with other entrepreneurs and even thinking about what I've gone through as well, it seems like you kind of have to have both sides of that coin, right? It's like you have to play into that ADD a little bit and have all the different side projects going on, because you don't know what people are going to go for. You don't know if the timing is just right. So you might put something out that's too soon or too late. So you might as well just have all these different feelers out there. And then I'm sure that you sometimes have those periods or those phases where you then go in the other direction and you say, okay, I've got all these side projects going on, but then it's time to figure out what the winners and the losers are, what to get rid of, what to focus on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think the biggest thing's always been like, like if I commit to an existing project and let's say there's like a new idea or a new business idea that really like sparks my interest, to me, it's just like whatever initial commitment I made to the first business, as long as I'm keeping that, like from a time standpoint and like a work effort standpoint, and as long as I can manage having that second business or third business, whatever it is, and I can do that in my extra time, I'm totally all for it. You know what I mean? But like if it's a thing where by me starting business number two, business number one is going to like suffer or it's going to be on the decline in terms of how much time and effort I put in, then it's kind of like, okay, that's a warning flag. I don't know if I can handle both projects at the same time, So I think that's usually how I like to kind of do it.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we all need to be aware of, in that if we might have all these things going on, and if we have some new idea, it's important that the new idea adds, it doesn't just move, right? Because it might be that you have this new idea, but then if the existing business that's already making money suffers, that's a really scary place to be. So do you have any sort of secrets, or do you have a special system or something of just handling your time management? Because it seems like the way that you describe some of the stuff is, if you have a new idea, you make sure to put like you said, the initial commitment and the work effort, you put the necessary time into things without letting the rest of it suffer. So, I mean, do you have like a calendar? Do you work set hours? Do you make sure to have accountability or a team? Or like, what do you do if you think you can narrow it down to one or two things? What do you think you do that ensures that you have good time management with all this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the one thing that I do is that I've kind of like over the years, I've really figured out what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. So I really like to focus on my strengths and kind of apply those on a day-to-day basis. And I surround myself with a really good team that kind of balances me out and is really good at the things that I'm weak at. So I think that's one thing that really helps. And then the second thing that I really do for time management is I just kind of try to chunk out my day. So like, like leaving the morning hours for like meetings and kind of like some of the toughest things that come up in a day, like the most urgent things, meetings, board meetings, interviews, phone calls, all that kind of stuff. And then, like I eat lunch, and then like that middle period between like lunch and like midday kind of thing is like my time to like spend with like my employees and like managing people and just like getting everyone on the same page. And then I like to go to the gym around like 3 or 4. And then pretty much after 4 o'clock onwards, I like to just like, it's just like my time to work. You know what I mean? Where I'm not like dealing with people, not doing phone calls, not doing interviews, no interruptions. And that's kind of just how I really balance out my schedule. And I've seen that to really work well for me.
Okay, great. And to use your term, absolutely. And an interesting kind of, I guess, realization that I had, and it took me way too long to figure this out, but for the longest time, I was resistant to splitting up the day in the way that you describe. You say that like in the morning you deal with like meetings, interviews, phone calls. Then later in the day it's like employee stuff, and then really later in the day it's your own time. And I resisted that for the longest time. I just told myself, and it was probably arrogance, I told myself, well, I'll just sit down and I'll do whatever's in front of me. But then, and I'm sure that's a recipe for the day controlling you. And sometimes we have to set that structure, and it's kind of weird to get in that habit, because it's like, well, I thought that the whole point of me being in business for myself and an entrepreneur was that I have this freedom. And it took me the longest time to realize, okay, well, I still have the freedom, but I'm just setting the rules for myself ahead of time. I can always change that routine, that schedule, but I'm choosing how I control the day, and then I'm sticking to that plan, just so that way I make sure that I stay on track. So I mean, I'm 100%, 1,000, a million percent in agreement with all these things that you're doing here, that you stuck to these really good entrepreneurial habits to ensure your success. And that kind of leads me to asking about this income incubator. So we touched on it a little bit in the beginning, is that people can choose one of 7 online business models, and they can jump in and put their idea into reality. So can you unpack that a little bit more? Like what kind of makes it stand out, and what can people expect once they join it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that I do want to mention is that when you sign up for the academy, you get access to all 7 different business models for one price. So my biggest thing is that, I've seen a lot of people go out there in the market and try like one course, and then they end up starting a business in that realm, and they go, oh man, this business isn't for me, or they're just not able to find success. And for me, it's been like, I want people to be successful, and I want people to be happy with the online business they create. So I literally give them everything in one package, right? And it's like, okay, you go out and you start your mobile app business, Nestle, you don't like it, or it's not a good fit for you. It's not like you just wasted all your money. You can backtrack right back, come in here and start another business. And so that's like the one thing that we definitely offer. And then the second thing that I tell people when people ask me, like, how's this different from anything else? I think unfortunately in the marketplace, there's so much like repackaged and unauthentic content out there. And I think that's the biggest difference with what we do here is like, every single business that I teach, I've actually done myself, put in the blood, sweat, and tears to go through the process. I know the hiccups and the obstacles that people may face, how to overcome them. And it's a legitimate shortcut from experience in terms of how to achieve success the fastest with one of these business models. And I think out there's a ton of people that, heard about a really cool business idea or concept or whatever it is. And then they go out there and they just Google a bunch of articles or watch a bunch of videos and then create their own material around it. And they're just not in a proper place to be able to teach it to someone else, And one of the things that I saw early on was when cryptocurrency in like December, January was so hot, so many people started coming out, becoming cryptocurrency experts and dropping all these courses and stuff like that. And I was like going through some of this material and stuff like that. And I was like, man, like my knowledge in cryptocurrency is probably like maybe at like a 10, 15% level, like a beginner to intermediate. And some of the things that people were teaching was like, man, I could teach this better, and I'm not in any place to teach it. And I think that's the biggest thing with my academy is that, it's all authentic. It's 100% legitimate, and it's just coming from experience. Like I'm not going to make any false promises, no false guarantees, stuff like that. And the biggest thing that I tell people is like, like you actually have to work hard to be successful. You're not going to be a millionaire overnight. You're not just going to get on, log in, sign up, and all of a sudden be traveling the world or whatever it is. Like if you're willing to work hard, I will give you the tools necessary to be successful. That's pretty much how I put it.
Super awesome. Yeah. And this sounds fantastic. And you're so right. It's a jungle out there, right? Because sometimes people are teaching something and they don't necessarily know it themselves, or maybe they know it themselves, but they're not good teachers, or sometimes things are out of date, or sometimes it's tempting to go the bootstrapping route and read free articles or watch free YouTube videos, but then you're piecing things together, and then things move so fast these days that by the time you figure out, say, making an app or Amazon e-commerce, then it might have changed on you. So it makes perfect sense to join a course. That way you have that mentor who has already shown you the way. You have that little bit of a community to help you out. So theincomeincubator.com is the place to go to join this thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people can just go to theincomeincubator.com, and all the information's there. And then if anyone's got questions or anything like that, they can fill out the submission form or just get in touch with me, and I'm happy to always help and answer questions.
Fantastic. So once again, that is theincomeincubator, theincomeincubator.com. And as we kind of close the door on this conversation here, Jeet, is there anything I know that you're still a pretty young guy, but you've gone through just a lot of stuff. Is there anything that you'd wish you known back when you were 15 and your dad woke you up and you got started on this whole journey? Is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew when you first got in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like growing up, I had like even before like 15 or even 17, I think I had like little spurts of like entrepreneurship, like sparks almost, where like, I had like a chance to start a business, or I came across a cool idea that I wanted to pursue, and then I was just like, I'll let it go or whatever. And I think the biggest advice that I would tell myself if I was that young, or someone even younger than me that may have these kind of like sparks of entrepreneurship, is just go out there and do it. Like, I wish I started even younger, and like, it sounds crazy because I started fairly young compared to most people, but it's just it's such an awesome experience. And like, if you ever want to start a business, whether you're like 5 years old, 10 years old, whatever it is, just go out there and do it. Like, just see what happens, like it'll be a really fun and enticing experience.
Fantastic. I love it. Awesome advice. Yeah, I mean, I agree completely that the mistakes that you might make along the way are really minuscule compared to the huge mistake of not trying, giving up, or just working too slowly, or talking yourself out of it, because you might lose all those years that you could have been building a business, all those years that you could have had that success, and you definitely won't get the time back. So very important lesson. So go ahead, do it now, and we'll see everyone at theincomeincubator.com. And thanks so much, Jeet, for dropping a ton of important life lessons on us and sharing with your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to share.
This is Robert Plank, and would you like to be a guest on the program? Do you have an idea for a future episode, or do you just want to tell us how we're doing? Get in touch with us right now at marketeroftheday.com/ask to let us know.